get going. Hello, Adam.
Hey, Claire, how are you?
Good. Where are you on this fine Tuesday?
Philadelphia suburbs. Not quite as nice as Argentina, but we'll take it.
I don't know. Philadelphia suburbs is pretty nice. So you guys have, and today is the primary day, right? In Philadelphia.
It is, yes.
Big day.
Need to vote.
Go get your sticker. All right. So, Adam, you are awesome. And I just want to read just a little bit of your bio for folks who don't already kind of know everything about you. Adam Grant is Wharton's top-rated professor and a New York Times writer on work and psychology. He has been recognized as one of the world's 25 most influential management thinkers. Harvard Review's most influential international thinker, the world's 40 best business professors under 40, and Malcolm Gladwell's favorite thinkers. So he's on lots of lists. Previously, he was a record-setting advertising director, a junior Olympic springboard diver, and a professional magician, which is crazy. Adam is the author of 2 New York Times bestselling books translated into 32 languages. The Originals explores how individuals champion new ideas and leaders fight groupthink. It is a #1 national bestseller and one of Amazon's best books of February 2016. Give and Take examines why helping others drives our success and was named one of the best books of 2013 by Amazon, Apple, the Financial Times, and the Wall Street Journal, as well as one of Oprah's riveting reads and Harvard Business Review's Ideas That Shaped Management. And Adam is one of the most generous leaders out there. Since the moment we first met over email some years ago, you have just always been sort of so kind and helpful and so attentive and responsive. But I guess you know that, right, about yourself?
just trying to rise to the standard that you set. Claire, I feel like when I email you, sometimes you even respond before I've hit send.
Oh, that's really funny.
I don't know how you do it, but funny. It's definitely challenged the rest of us to get our acts together.
Not true. There was this New York Times magazine cover story, and it was called "Is Giving the Secret to Getting Ahead?" Right? And it's kind of a bold sentence. I'm curious what you thought about that as the title. But then I also kind of want to use this as sort of an entry point into telling us what Give and Take is really all about for folks who haven't heard it.
Well, I thought it was an extremely clever headline.
Okay.
Because we normally think about giving as something you do for its own rewards. Mm-hmm. And to ask, is giving the secret to getting? Is sort of something that intrigues us, because it's not what we would expect an article about giving to highlight. Mm-hmm. Also, the getting ahead part, to say, look, we normally reserve generosity for our families, for our communities, for our philanthropic or charitable work. Like, is this relevant to my career? That's kind of intriguing. I want to know more about that. And I love that it was a question, because Give and Take really started with me trying to understand what is the effect of being generous on our lives at work. I was struck that I had been really fortunate to learn from some mentors who are amazing givers. Mm-hmm. And for me, a giver is not a volunteer or philanthropist. It's just someone who enjoys helping others and often does it with no strings attached. Mm-hmm. And there's people who are sharing their knowledge freely, who go out of their way to make introductions when you could benefit from knowing somebody else, who mentor those who are, more junior, or just show up early or stay late to support other people. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have takers. A taker is somebody who's basically trying to come out ahead in every interaction. So instead of, what can I do for you, it's what can you do for me? Which means the takers are the people who always volunteer for the interesting, visible, important projects and leave the grunt work for everyone else. Mm-hmm. But then they walk away with the lion's share of credit. And we love working with takers, right? So what I initially found was that most people really wanted to be givers, but they also knew that there were takers out there. So what they did was they reserved their giving for their families, their friends, and a few trusted colleagues. And then in the rest of their interactions, they chose this third style called matching. So matching is basically, I'll do this for you if you do that for me. It's quid pro quo, it's reciprocity, it's about trying to maintain balance and fairness in interactions. And that seemed like a pretty safe way to live your life. My question was, is that the most effective and productive way to live your life? And the answer was a very definitive maybe. So I ended up comparing givers, takers, and matchers, looking at their success in lots of different jobs, and that was kind of the point of entry into this work.
And so when you kind of break down everyone out there, is it pretty divided in terms of givers, takers, and matchers, or are most of us takers and then a small percentage of us are givers?
It's hard to know because we all have moments of giving, taking, and matching, right? Your style is how you treat most of the people most of the time, kind of your default approach to interactions. My best estimate across industries is that it seems like at least 60% of people tend to be matchers most of the time. And then, about an even mix of givers and takers in the rest of the population. But that can vary a lot by organizational culture.
Matching sounds like taking in some ways.
It can be, although the cool thing about matchers is they really believe in justice. So they're bothered actually a lot by takers. And this is one of the reasons that if you look at the data, the takers are not typically the best performers, is most people are matchers. And there's nothing a matcher hates more than seeing a taker act selfishly and get away with it. But that's just not fair. So when a matcher meets a taker, the matcher just feels like it's their mission in life to punish that person and, sort of deliver the sword of justice, becoming the karma police. And some matchers are willing to go out on a limb to do this. They actually will feed takers false information and try to sabotage their success. And, that's not what most people do, right? What most matchers do instead is they use gossip. And they warn a bunch of people after they meet a taker, like, hey, don't trust this person. Might take advantage of you. And that makes it really hard for takers to succeed because most matchers are willing to basically spread that reputational information. And that means that takers can't start over fresh in every interaction. That, when they've exploited someone in one way or another, it tends to come back around. So this is good news for all of us who want to live in a world where takers do not succeed.
And so is that admirable? Is that okay that we try to take down the takers?
I actually think we have to.
Okay.
If we don't, then it's really easy for them to continue to take advantage of other people. And what you see is if you build a team or an organization of mostly givers, the takers are actually better at deceiving and exploiting people. It's really bringing in some matchers to fight fire with fire and, sort of make sure that takers get what they deserve, that allows the norm of generosity to sustain itself.
Oh, that's interesting. So givers have the tendency to basically just be taken advantage of when a taker comes in.
You can relate to this, right? Givers tend to be really trusting.
Yeah.
And they assume, the best in everyone.
Right.
Tend to see more potential in other people even than sometimes people see in themselves. And that can create a lot of problems when they do encounter takers and they don't realize it, or they say, yeah, this person was really selfish, but I know they had good intentions and, it really didn't cost me that much. Those kinds of choices can accumulate and really take a toll over time.
So what about, this, some of us have kind of heard this advice that, you should try to do something for others without thinking about what they're going to do in return. And you have this quote in Give and Take where you say, if we create networks with the sole intention of getting something, we won't succeed. We can't pursue the benefits of networks. The benefits ensue from investments in meaningful activities and relationships, right? I think, though, that it can be really hard to do that. If you have sort of a typical scenario of, let's say, one of your students trying to get to know you or trying to get to know some other well-known professor, it can be hard for that person, that student, let's say, to not think about what they might get out of the interaction or the relationship long term. How do we try to not think like that?
Oh, this is hard. So I think there's a tremendous amount of value to be gained from interactions that are not transactional, where we start by asking, what can I do to contribute to this person's success? And, then that's your starting point, right? So you start off every interaction with the mindset of being a giver. But that doesn't mean you have to become Gandhi or Mother Teresa, right? What you want to do, I think, for starters, is what the entrepreneur Adam Rifkin calls the 5-minute favor, which is just a small act that costs you very little but can benefit others a lot. And this is great news for givers because it's a reminder that you don't have to spend like 74 hours with every person who asks you for help. And then you start doing 5-minute favors. You see if the person is trustworthy. You start to notice, like, gosh, I only hear from this person when they need something.
Right.
Or, this person not only doesn't pay it back, but also doesn't pay it forward. And what Adam does to test people is after he does a 5-minute favor for them, he asks them to help somebody else that he's trying to help. And the question is, are they willing to continue this norm of generosity? And then, you use that as a gauge for how far do you want to extend yourself for this person. Now, that being said, I think there are roles where it's just natural for one person to be the giver, right? So like as a professor, I don't want anything from my students.
Right.
And when I have students come into office hours and say, how can I help you? I'm like, you missed the point of this relationship. Like I became a professor because I had some extraordinary teachers who inspired me. And I wanted to try to pay forward even just a fraction of what I gained from them. And so like my students giving to me, I'm like, well, yeah, the way you give to me is you give me the opportunity to be a giver.
Right.
Which is, sort of like this big meta tautology thing. But where it leaves me is, I say, look, what makes me feel like I'm giving, which is like the best gift you can give me as a professor, is when you ask me for advice, you come back a few months later and you tell me, like, here's what I ended up deciding. Here's what impact your advice had. And in some of those situations, I don't even remember having given the advice, right? Let alone, that it was useful. And so that kind of makes my day. And I think that, that a lot of students feel uncomfortable and they say, look, I don't want to be a taker in this relationship. I like to be a giver in every relationship. And I'm like, look, there is a difference between taking and receiving. Taking is using somebody for personal gain. Receiving is saying, look, I will accept your contribution with gratitude. And then when I can pay it forward, I will try to do that. And, I think it's sensible for people to say, look, if I'm in a position where, it's my responsibility as a student to receive, right? That's what learning is all about. I'm supposed to soak up, knowledge and then make it useful. Then, I should be comfortable with that and know that I'm giving other people the opportunity to give. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. So there are two things I want to unpack. I'm trying to decide okay, I'll go with one route first and then come back to the other. So there is someone in my life who I think is a taker.
Uh-oh.
And I think that
cut that tie immediately.
Oh, so that's the answer, to cut the tie?
Not necessarily, but go on.
Well, no, and I think just over the years I've seen that it's just sort of the classic thing where she asks me for favors. I feel like I only hear from her when she needs a favor. And I feel like there are, a handful of times where I've reached out for something and I've really gotten some pretty minimal effort in response. Like just, bare bones email kind of response that doesn't actually help me, right? So, and this bothers me, but I guess I feel bad, or I don't know, I don't like conflict or whatever it is. So I don't really know what to do. So I just sort of ignore it. And then the next time she asks, I just sort of provide the favor again. What am I supposed to do here?
I don't know. I just study this stuff, right? I am not the arbiter of what constitutes a giver or how you should make these decisions. I'll tell you where I've come down, though, from gathering a lot of data on this and from talking to a lot of people who have grappled with similar situations and, frankly, having struggled with a lot of them myself. I would say a few things. The first thing is that there is a big difference between pleasing people and helping them. And I felt for a long time this pressure that, like, if I wanted to be a giver, that meant I had to say yes to every request. And at some point, it becomes clear that you can't help all the people all the time with all the requests. And I learned that every no that I said was a chance to say yes to something that mattered more. Whether it was someone, I had a stronger relationship with, or, a more unique request where I was the only person who could help with it. And so I've tried to make my decisions much more on that basis now of saying, look, is there somebody else who could be equally or even more helpful with this? And if so, I don't know why you came to me. Like, here are the 3 other people who would be better to ask, and they will not steer you astray, whereas I might. Or, what I try to do is I've tried to be more proactive about, sort of setting priorities on who I want to help and how. So my hierarchy of priorities goes family first, students second, colleagues third, everyone else fourth. And that means in those moments when there's a trade-off between, a colleague wants feedback on a paper and a student wants some career advice, I will always say yes to the student. Because I didn't become a professor to help other professors, right?
Yeah.
I like to do that when I can, but it's not my core purpose in my job. And then, as far as the how is concerned, what I really love doing is sharing knowledge and making introductions. So, like when the best thing that could happen is when somebody comes to me and says, have you ever seen a study on, and then, the fill in the blank is something about worker psychology. And it makes me think like, oh, all the hours I spend reading academic journals, like this is not time wasted. And I don't know who else you would have gone to with that esoteric question. Like you chose the right person. So I guess the first thing I would consider is like, is she coming to you with the right kinds of requests that are unique in your wheelhouse? And then, I guess the next question is like, what is the cost? Is she imposing too much on you? I would say, you help whenever it really costs you nothing. Like if it's a 30-second email to write back,
Sure.
not a big deal.
Right.
If she's asking you for an hour of your time and you really feel like she's a taker, I think that you have a responsibility to hold her accountable for either reciprocating or helping other people. Because otherwise you're just reinforcing her taker habits.
Right.
You're allowing her to get away with it, which is not cool.
Right. Which is what I think I'm doing.
It sounds like it. And I mean, this is like the curse of being not only a giver, but I would guess, Claire, that you're a highly agreeable giver who really enjoys getting along with people, right? To your point about hating conflict.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's the worst combination when it comes to getting stuck, like just doing every single favor for everyone. But
Yeah.
I do think that most people wait too long to cut these ties or to at least be honest in the relationship. Sheryl Sandberg gave me a great example of this last week. She had a guy come and work for her who had come from a previous culture that was very cutthroat. And he just had this reputation for being extremely self-serving in his interactions and sort of manipulative, and he was all about himself. And she sat him down and said, look, like this is your reputation. And, I don't think it's going to make you successful around here. Like, this is not the culture we want to build. Nobody trusts you. Nobody wants to work with you. And if you don't change this, I'm going to have to let you go.
Wow.
It's an incredibly hard conversation.
Wow.
But he said it was the most important thing that's happened to him on the job in his whole career.
Wow.
Because she made his reputation visible to him. And in other parts of his life, he was much more generous. And he just had this mindset that he learned, through his career that at work, like, if you don't put yourself first, no one else will. And he dealt with a lot of takers, and he thought he had to be a taker to get ahead in a dog-eat-dog world. So, I think that kind of conversation is worth having. And it's easier to have, if somebody works for you directly, right? But
sure. They'll have to listen to you pretty much.
Yeah, or at least if they're smart, they will.
Right.
But I've had more of these conversations since writing Give and Take, where I've said to people very explicitly, hey, in our interactions so far, this is the impression I've gotten of you, and I'm sure I'm misreading your intent. I only have access to a small slice of your behavior, and I just thought you should be aware this is what I've seen of you, and these are not the kinds of people that I want in my life.
I love it. That's empowering.
Are you going to try it?
And that sounds really hard to do. Yeah, I'm going to have to
totally hard.
Have some coffee and then, amp up for it. So the other thing you said a few minutes ago that I kind of wanted to unpack a little bit more is, I think, really, really interesting. This idea of sort of what role we are in life with another person, what role we serve to that person, and sort of how that changes if we give or if we take. And so for you as a professor and a student, right, you're in the clear role that you should be giving, right? So One of my questions is, if you're someone who's not a professor, I mean, there are many roles in life that kind of are more clear, boss and employee or whatever it may be, professor and student. But if you're not in that situation and you're kind of trying to figure out how to find people who might give to you, whether they are, some sort of guides or a mentor or a coach, but not someone you're paying, how do you go about trying to find people and then also in turn trying to help others? Mm-hmm.
I think the place to start is, I think it's useful to look for people who you have something in common with, but most people do this wrong. So they say like, oh, I go to this university and I'm going to reach out through our alumni database. Or, I work at this company and I'm going to reach out to somebody who used to work at this company. And that's not enough for people to feel that, they should actually spend time with you. If you look at who really connects and feels like, wow, I really want to sit down and have this conversation, it's usually people who share what are called uncommon commonalities, which are rare similarities, not just any similarity. So Claire, you're in Argentina right now. This is a great example.
Yep.
You're from California originally?
Yep.
What city?
Berkeley, California, the Athens of the West.
Great. So if you're in Berkeley and you meet someone else from Berkeley, do you care?
No, you're in Berkeley.
No, everybody's from Berkeley, right?
Right.
If you run into someone from Berkeley now in Argentina, how do you feel about that person?
I mean, it's huge. If I see someone with a Cal hat, it's like I'll like stop them on the street.
Totally. You're best friends, right? Like this person is all of a sudden somebody you're really excited to spend time with. That's an uncommon commonality effect. We just naturally gravitate toward people who share things that very few other people share, which sort of signals like this is a special relationship. And so I would look for people that you have uncommon commonalities with. I found that like a couple of the best early mentors I had, I was a diver and a magician, right?
Right.
And so
professors who were magicians.
Who used to dive. I found someone who used to perform magic, and like who also had been involved in things that I was curious about. I think you have to figure out what are your unique hobbies, your unusual traits. Have you done something that's sort of relatively rare, and then you look for people who have already gone through a similar experience. And then what you do when you reach out to them is you ask them for advice. Because asking for help is a big request. It feels like a burden to a lot of people. The great thing about advice is it's just sharing information. It's low cost. And when you ask people for advice, most of the time it flatters them. To paraphrase Benjamin Franklin, we all admire the wisdom of people who come to us for advice. Right? Let's face it, they have great taste. They knew to come to me.
Right.
So smart. And that leaves people feeling really good about you, that you value, you showed you valued their opinion. And then it also forces them to take your perspective and walk in your shoes. And they're much more likely to then feel motivated to help you moving forward because, they really understood where you're coming from and they kind of appreciate you. And I think that's a good starting point for getting mentoring.
I love that. And I really think that distinction between advice and help is fascinating and not something, when you first said it, I was thinking, well, they're the same thing. But no, they're not the same thing. And
not at all.
That's very interesting. Well, this has been so awesome. I thank you so much for all the time you've given me. Can you sort of tell folks what you're working on now that the originals book tour is kind of coming to a close and you're back in your home office and trying to be a little bit more in Philadelphia?
I have no idea what I'm working on now. Just trying to get like the rest of my life back in order. I'm spending most of my time right now just working on trying to continue to build cultures of giving and of originality in organizations. I would love to see more workplaces be dominated by generosity and really be, I guess, like sites where we think about creativity going to come to life as opposed to going to die.
Right.
And I think there's so many great ideas and passionate people who get sort of squashed by organizations that make it hard for people to feel like they can support each other or that they can speak up. And so I want to try to shift cultures to create more hospitable workplaces for most of us. So that'll be a focus for the next few months, and then we'll see where we go from there. How about you?
How about me? I don't know. I just sort of hang out online. Where can folks find you, Adam?
Oh, if you go to adamgrant.net, you will find everything I've ever written for free, except the books, but there are chapters available on those, which is as much as we're allowed to share. And there are also some fun assessments where you can take a quiz to test your knowledge on what it takes to be original. You can get rated by people who know you on whether you're a giver, taker, or matcher. Ooh. I'd say try that at your own risk because you might not like the person staring back at you in the mirror.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. This was awesome, and you rock.
Thank you. Wonderful to see you.